So one of my favorite questions is, why are you here? I don't mean why you are here existentially. It's too early in the party for that question. I mean, why did you come to this fine place today? Ultimately, those may in fact be the same answer. But there's probably some distinction to be made in the immediate. There are reasons why we are here this morning. There are causes that account for our choosing to show up in this place. We want to celebrate, we need to mourn. We seek comfort or challenge. We wish to love and be loved. Whatever the answer, we want to be here. For a diversity of reasons, we each made a conscious decision to come worship together. Or did we? Was it really a choice? Were we going to come here this morning regardless of the experience of deciding to do so? Perhaps it was preordained. Could it be that your being here today was predestined results due to nigh on infinite causes and consequences dating back to the Big Bang? A series, we got to that point in the party real quick, didn't we? Are you here because of a series of causes and consequences that you have no say in whatsoever? I know that's not what it feels like. It feels like you chose to be here this morning, but that may not turn out to be the exact fact of the matter. And to try to explain why this is the case, I'm going to tell you a story. Tell me if you've heard this before. A man came face to face with knowledge in the form of an apple. A curious fellow, he was fascinated by the natural scene around him and the apple tree near which he sat. And then came the fall. Everything changed. Now, to be clear, it was the apple that fell, not the man. You see, our protagonist's name is Isaac Newton. And what changed everything was his assertion that unseen but distinct, measurable, and predictable forces were causing the apple to fall to the ground. No longer did God keep the seas at bay. No longer did reality have a conscious purpose of its own. So be careful of apple. They keep the doctor away, but as Old Testament Adam and Enlightenment Isaac can attest, they have a conspicuous and dramatic potential to destroy worldviews and realign identity. For no less than that is what gravity did. The discovery of gravity was an assault, the final and definitive assault on the preceding paradigm. Like most assaults, this one had collateral damage. And much like Galileo and Darwin, Newton did not set out to kill God. And yet, there lies the Occidental deity amongst the rubble of antiquity. And next to him lay the corpse of free will. Now, it might come as a shock that God and free will were in a relationship of such intimacy that they would both be felled by the same apple. It's certainly not without irony. To many, an omnipotent, omniscient God might be synonymous with predestination and the suppression of free will, and yet, in the end, the paradigm that Newton and his kind ushered in eliminated the possibility of either. So here's the forensics. The way Newton described gravity set us on a trajectory of cause and effect, where every event has material causes, identifiable, measurable causes, and every effect can be predicted by taking these causes into account. And with a few exceptions, this is a view maintained still in physics, biology, and psychology. It's a notion of reality where our predictive accuracy is limited only by the amount and accuracy of the information we possess. So the metaphor is billiard balls. The metaphor is machine. And it is a powerful worldview. Cause and effect took us to the moon. However, our personalities, our decision-making methods are reduced or perhaps elevated to a definite, if difficult to figure, mixture of DNA, biological secretions, and socialization that is purely mechanistic. So I first started thinking about this when I was considering the Buddhist concept of pratitya samutpada. This is the doctrine of dependent origination, or mutual causation. And essentially it observes that every being is contingent on every other being. That reality itself arises in an infinite and interdependent web of causation. That nothing in the universe exists without everything else. And that made a kind of sense to me. I could reverse engineer my present circumstance to that line of thought. And yet I was thinking, if everything causes everything, that doesn't leave much room for free will. And I've really grown up to like the concept of free will. So what to do? And then it also occurred to me that, hey, this interdependent web thing sounds kind of familiar. It's right there in our principles. To be fair, the committees at General Assembly didn't come up with the interdependent web out of thin air. It's attested to in several wisdom traditions, from Buddhism to the environmental movement to deep ecology to physics and Western philosophy. But let's for a moment actually imagine it. Think of a spider web. And you are a node, or maybe a strand, on the web. And I'm assuming a spider web as we imagine it is more or less one-dimensional. But existence is not. So at every node, imagine several other strands connecting at every conceivable angle. Each of these strands connects to a node in yet another web. And each node in another web have strands attached to it at every conceivable angle. And this tightly compacted weave of interconnected web is as big as existence. If I move one node here, everything moves, and everything is always moving. If every event is mutually dependent, if it's all cause and effect, and every effect is another cause, what then of free will? Under pressure from all existence, is there any room for it? So Newton and gravity and the billiard ball, cause and effect, present a significant challenge to free will. Buddhism and our own UU principles severely limit any notion of free agency. And it's beginning to feel like piling on, but contemporary science kicks it to the curb. Benjamin Libet conducted the touchstone experiment for this in the 1970s. He was able to determine that people were acting before they decided to act, even though they thought they were deciding to act before they acted. Follow? He found that the brain had initiated movement before any conscious decision to move had been made. According to Libet, free will, insofar as it is conscious, is more like storytelling than decision-making. It is purely after the act. This is crucial. We'll return to it in a little bit. There are other such experiments out there, and I'll spare you a bibliography and instead quote Malcolm Gladwell, author of best-selling books Blink and The Tipping Point, who drives home the argument. He states that if you go through all of this research, which I didn't have to do, and neither do you now, that's been done in psychology recently, you end up with the position that the conscious will is an illusion. So by now I'm hoping that I've put some serious questions into your mind about the possibility of free will. As if you could choose to believe in free will or not. And it's kind of a bummer. I mean, I'm not asking to control the stars, or even a starship, or even someone else. I just want the dignity of self-control. And so now inherent dignity is collateral damage also. So is free will dead? I think so. At least the way I thought about it as a younger person. And yet our will, our dignity may still experience a resurrection and a new life. And it's a question now of perspective. Many years ago, I worked in the kitchen at my home church in Austin, Texas. And one Sunday, I thought it would be fun to teach this precocious little kid named Spencer some really big words. Basically, I wanted to mess with his teacher on Monday. And he was a little guy, a great kid. He's like 4 or 8 or something. Smaller than me. So I tried to teach him the word synesthesia. I didn't have any luck. So after failing to teach him this word, I said, "All right, Spencer, what's the biggest word you know?" And he thought about it for a minute, and then he said, "The sky." The sky. Thank you, Spencer, for teaching me a truly big word and for shifting my perspective in the process. So with that in mind, let's go back to the interconnected web of existence and understand this. Every event in the world that has happened, every breath, every confession, every tear, every joy, every misspelling, every shift of sand on the ocean's floor, every leaf budding in spring, every inching of every worm, every event is plugged into you, is shaping you and propelling you, just as you propel it all likewise. So can you feel that? Because I can't. Can you feel some of it? Maybe. Can you imagine it? Yeah. I think we can imagine it, and that's the trick. You see, what we seem to experience as all these causes, all these external circumstances, what we experience as an external world that is out there independent of us is actually something that we dream up, something internal. The science writer Tor Nordstranders writes, that the merging of the lesson from quantum mechanics with the lesson from neurobiology attests to a very simple fact. What we perceive as being outside of us is indeed a fancy and elegant projection of what we have inside. And we do make this projection as a result of interacting with something not inside, but everything we experience is inside. So the universe may be billiard balls, but the meaning of the matter and their movements, the meaning of them, that is ours to assign. In some ways, we're projecting the events that determine our actions. Well, that's not necessarily free will as we all grew up thinking about it. But it is a radical kind of agency for which I don't even think we have a word. This is the agency with which we may reappropriate our inherent dignity. We are now at the point where what we regard as decisions are in reality justifications of actions that we've already taken prior to our deciding to take them. However, it may be that these justifications, these stories about ourselves, are in effect a way to shape ourselves, a way to influence, if not determine, the next set of actions we take prior to deciding to take them. Our stories condition us. Our narratives train us. Do you want to change your ways? Start by telling yourself different stories about why you are doing that which you do. So what stories are you telling about yourself? What tales are you using to justify your actions? Why did you decide to do something? And the metaphor now isn't so much billiard balls or machines as it is surfing. We are surfers, riding longboards of consciousness on waves of interrelatedness, of pratitsamut para. This is radical agency, but it is also relational agency because what is outside is inside. What we perceive is us. So we need the world, we need our stories, and we need each other. Look around. When you see your neighbor's faults, then you will see your own also. When you see your neighbor's dignity, then you will have secured your own. And the stories you tell about the interaction that follows will shape your world and your will. So surf's up. Hang 10. Amen.